also dedicating daily to that pet too. So maybe, you can only spend time or take care of them like an hour a day, but you have a family member or friend, some type of long-term, any type of relationship that they would be able to substitute that extra time. So, something to keep in mind. Question two. How much space do you have available for a pet? Do you live in a large home and with plenty of outdoor space, either a large yard or potentially in the country? Do you have a standard size home with perhaps a yard, or might not have a fenced yard, but still a place to easily take a pet out for walks, perhaps like a dog, versus you could have a small apartment or condo where it's much less, or it's more challenging to take a pet outside if they need to on a regular basis. Question 3. What is your ideal level of pet interaction? Are you looking for sort of a high interaction and companionship? So this pet could provide you more companionship, but the con is that on a regular basis they might be more high maintenance. Our second option is more of that sweet spot where it's sort of more of a moderate interaction and playtime level. And our last option would be more low maintenance, minimal interaction. Maybe this pet is primarily confined to a cage, or even they could be a fish, which you would feed and stuff regularly, but they wouldn't be crawling on your lap all the time. Alright. Question 4. Do you have any allergies to pets? This is very important. You don't want to get a pet and then realize that it is a daily struggle with you and your allergies. And a follow-up question to this would be, does anybody in your household have any allergies to pets you're considering as well? Additionally, verify that you've spent time with that type of animal to ensure you don't have any allergies. Also, to get a better gauge on if that pet would be right for you. Alright, moving on to question 5. What is your budget for pet care and maintenance? Now, pet care and maintenance can, in general, be divided in certain species. For example, just smaller pets in general are less expensive, and ones that require less active care in general are also less expensive. Think gecko or snake versus large dog. So that's something to keep in mind, not just the initial cost of the animal, but think of it as more of a subscription service, and it's not something that you can just pause if 1 month is tight. So you really want to make sure that you have, your upfront costs that you're taking care of, being able to have that monthly budget, and ideally have sort of an emergency fund for pet expenses as well. Alright, question 6. How active is your lifestyle? Are you very active, moderately, or more sedentary? This is particularly important when, again, you're considering like a dog versus maybe a cat that's more indoors, and you don't have to take them on walks and things. Alright, moving on to question 7. Do you prefer a pet that is more independent or one that requires more attention? So this kind of goes somewhat hand in hand with some of our other questions, but sometimes it's really a lot of people find mammals in general just more attractive pet companions than reptiles or fish, but they require much less work than a dog. They don't require to be walked, and they require less playtime and activity as a whole. So that's something to keep in mind. I have a couple of books that I can recommend that also goes into more detail about cats, or if you're looking for another pet as well, you'd be interested in those. Okay, that's so wonderful. Let me grab those, and thank you